In 5 years, your EV's battery will be weaker. That's not a fear, that's chemistry. The real question is, how much weaker, and whether it actually changes anything about your life. The answer will surprise most people. Let's get into it. Here's what most EV owners will tell you after 5 years. The car doesn't feel old. It still accelerates the same way off the line, the charging port still works the same, the software is updated, the cabin is quiet, the drive feels modern. Nothing about the experience suggests you're sitting in a vehicle that's half a decade past its purchase date. That's the part nobody talks about when the battery degradation conversation comes up. People hear battery loses capacity over time, and they picture a smartphone from 2015 barely making it to lunch before dying. That's not what's happening inside a modern EV battery pack. The changes after 5 years are real, but they're subtle in a way most people don't expect going in. Real-world telematics data from Geotab, pulling from tens of thousands of EVs, shows batteries degrading at roughly 1.8% per year on average. After 5 years, that's somewhere between 5% and 10% total capacity loss for most drivers. The car still charges, still drives, still does everything it was doing on day one. It just holds a little less energy than it did when it was new. For most owners, 5 years in feels like a well-broken-in car, not a declining one. The first thing owners notice, if anything, most EV drivers don't wake up one morning and think, "My battery has degraded." What actually happens is more gradual than that. You might glance at your estimated range after a full charge and notice it's a few miles lower than it used to be. You might pick up on small seasonal differences. Your range in January looks a bit worse than it did a couple winters ago. You might find yourself paying slightly more attention to your efficiency readout on a long highway run. None of it is dramatic. None of it is a warning sign. It's just the quiet reality of a lithium-ion battery doing what lithium-ion batteries do, aging slowly and predictably. Data from Recurrent, which tracks battery health across large vehicle populations, shows that a Tesla Model 3 loses around 8% of capacity after 5 years. And critically, that loss isn't linear. About 6% drops in the first year or two before the degradation curve flattens significantly. After that initial settling, the battery stabilizes and ages much more slowly. So, if you noticed your range estimates dropped a bit early on and then seem to level off, that's exactly what the data says should happen. It's normal, it's expected, and it's not a sign the battery is failing. The range difference in real life. On paper, a 5 to 10% range drop after 5 years sounds like it should matter. Let's put in actual numbers. Take a car with 300,000 miles of range when new. After 5 years of typical use, that same car is likely sitting somewhere between 270 and 285 miles of real range. On paper, that's a loss of 15 to 30 miles. Now, think about how you actually use the car. Your commute is still the same distance. Your errands haven't changed. You're still plugging in at night and waking up to a charged car. The only scenario where that 15 to 30 mile difference becomes relevant is a long road trip where you were already planning your charging stops down to the mile. And even then, you'd probably just add one short top-up somewhere along the route. For the overwhelming majority of daily EV use, commutes, school runs, grocery runs, weekend driving, a 5 to 10% range reduction changes nothing about the routine. You charge when you get home. You leave in the morning with enough range. The car is still completely practical. Studies back this up. A 250-mile EV at 5 years old with normal degradation typically delivers 220 to 230 miles of usable range. That's still comfortably more than most people drive in a week. Why some owners think range dropped more? This is where perception and reality start to split. Talk to a 5-year EV owner, and they'll sometimes tell you the range has really dropped. Push a little harder, and a pattern emerges. They drove a lot in winter, or they changed jobs and now spend more time on the highway, or they put on new tires that weren't EV optimized, or they've started driving faster since they got comfortable with the car. None of those things is battery degradation, but every single one of them cuts your range. Cold weather alone can reduce EV range by 20 to 40% compared to mild conditions. That's not your battery dying, that's chemistry slowing down in the cold, the same way it does in every lithium-ion pack, everywhere, always. When spring comes back, so does your range. Driving at 80 miles per hour instead of 70 can reduce efficiency by 15% or more. That's aerodynamics, not degradation. Worn down tires with rolling resistance can quietly drain 5 to 10% of your range without you ever realizing. Battery degradation is permanent and gradual. Most of what people blame on their aging battery is actually seasonal, behavioral, or mechanical, and it's reversible. Not all range loss is the same thing. Knowing the difference matters. How your driving habits matter after 5 years. By the time you hit the 5-year mark, your driving habits have probably settled into a pattern, and here's what the data shows. Those habits have more influence over your real-world range than the battery's age does. Speed is the biggest lever. Every time you push past highway speeds into the upper 70s and 80s, you're fighting aerodynamic drag exponentially. That costs energy your battery didn't lose to degradation. You're just spending it faster. Acceleration matters too. The instant torque delivery that makes EV satisfying to drive is also a real energy draw. Consistent hard launches from every light adds up over a commute. Regenerative braking is the other side of that equation. Drivers who learn to use regen well, coasting into stops, anticipating traffic, letting the motor do the slowing, are consistently getting more out of each charge than drivers who brake late and hard. After 5 years, the gap between an efficient driver and an inefficient one on the same car is routinely bigger than the gap created by 5 years of battery degradation. Your habits are a bigger variable than your battery's age. That's not a small distinction. Before we go further, hit subscribe. More EV content is coming that skips the marketing noise and gives you what the data actually shows. The biggest surprise for most owners. Ask someone who hasn't bought an EV yet and what they expect from a 5-year-old battery, and you'll hear the same fears every time. They expect major range loss. They expect battery issues. They expect the car to feel compromised in some way, like an old laptop that barely makes it through a meeting. Then ask someone who actually owns a 5-year-old EV what it's like. They'll tell you it's fine. The car works, the range is still usable, nothing major has changed. The gap between expectation and reality is one of the most consistent patterns in EV ownership data. People who go in bracing for a battery problem that, for the vast majority, never arrives. The 8-year, 100,000-mile battery warranties most manufacturers now offer aren't just marketing. Federal rules require them, and most automakers are comfortable guaranteeing at least 70% capacity retention through that window. That warranty floor is a legal commitment, and the real-world data suggests most vehicles stay comfortably above it. US research shows that only around 1% of newer EVs, those built from 2016 onward, have needed battery replacements, and those were covered under warranty. Outside of early models like the first-generation Nissan Leaf, which used air cooling and degraded faster in hot climates, modern liquid-cooled battery packs are holding up in a way that's genuinely outperforming early predictions. The biggest surprise for most 5-year EV owners isn't the range loss, it's how little they think about it. When range loss actually becomes noticeable, there's a version of this story where range loss is more visible. It just isn't the average experience. High-mileage drivers, rideshare operators, salespeople putting in 25,000 to 35,000 miles a year on a vehicle compress years of normal degradation into a much shorter window. A rideshare driver hitting 150,000 miles in 4 years is going to see more capacity loss than a commuter who puts on 12,000 miles a year. Heavy DC fast charging use is the other variable. Telematics data from Geotab shows that drivers using DC fast charging for more than 12% of their charging sessions degrade at around 2.5% per year, compared to 1.5% per year for those who fast charge infrequently. That's a real difference compounded over time. Extreme temperatures add to it. EVs that live outdoors in Arizona heat, charging regularly in high temperatures, accumulate calendar aging, a form of degradation that happens just from the battery sitting at high state of charge in heat, faster than vehicles in mild, temperate environments. Put those factors together, high mileage, heavy fast charging, extreme heat, and yes, you can end up with a battery that shows meaningful range loss before the vehicle reaches the warranty window. But that's the outlier. That's not the suburban commuter, the school-run parent, or the daily driver using home level 2 charging most nights. For most people, the experience is gradual, manageable, and well within what the car was designed to handle. What 5-year-old EVs are really like. Here's the honest summary from the data. After 5 years, most EVs are still reliable. They're still practical. They're still easy to live with every day. The battery is slightly smaller in terms of usable capacity. The range is slightly lower on paper. And in real-world daily driving, most owners feel almost none of it. A comprehensive analysis from the P3 group, studying 7,000 vehicles, found that battery capacity settled at around 90% state of health after 100,000 kilometers and held close to that level. Degradation didn't accelerate, it slowed. Modern battery management systems and the vehicles themselves are actively protecting the packs in ways the early lab models didn't account for. The Stanford study came to a similar conclusion, that real-world dynamic cycling, the kind that happens when you actually drive an EV daily, produces less cycle aging than static lab tests predicted. EVs are doing better on the road than the worst-case projections suggested. The technology has caught up to the concern. There are now Teslas and other EVs running on original packs at 150,000, 200,000, even 300,000 miles, with reduced range compared to new but still operational, still practical, still on the road. That's the real picture of what happens after 5 years. Not a battery crisis, not a surprise replacement bill, not a car that's become a liability. A vehicle that aged better than most people expected because of the engineering behind it was designed specifically to make that happen. Thermal management systems, battery management software, buffer zones that protect the top and bottom of the cell chemistry, and manufacturer warranties that hold them accountable if it goes wrong. The fear around EV battery degradation made sense when the technology was new and the data was thin. The data is no longer thin, and what it shows is that modern EVs age quietly, gradually, and far less dramatically than most people standing outside the ownership experience assume. Drop a comment below. How long have you owned your EV? And have you noticed any real-world range changes? Subscribe for more EV content built on actual data, not assumptions.